Hello and welcome back. I hope the last few days of preparation have treated you kindly, even when the syllabus feels endless and the clock never seems to slow down. This is the Sociology Desk, issue 091, and today you get three stories that examiners love: a rural employment scheme captured by local power, a quiet shift in how young Indians define family, and a strange new religion invented entirely by artificial intelligence. Stay with me, because in each case, I will show you exactly which thinker to name, which concept to anchor, and how to turn today's headline into marks in your answer sheet. Let's begin with our first story. A fact finding team investigating a tribal livelihood crisis found something quietly damning. The job cards under the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, the scheme you know as Mgnrega, were not being controlled by the government or by the local Gram Sabha. They were being controlled by whoever owned the local earth moving machine, the JCB. Whoever owned that machine decided who got work and who did not. This is Paper 2 territory, under Rural and Agrarian Transformation in India, and it is a gift of a case study. The concept you must reach for here is Robert Michels' iron law of oligarchy. Michel studied European socialist parties and trade unions, organizations built on the most democratic ideals imaginable. And he found that every single one of them drifted toward control by a small, entrenched leadership. Democratic design does not guarantee a democratic outcome. Now watch how this applies to Mgnrega. A rights-based employment guarantee designed to give power to the poorest rural worker still ends up controlled by whoever already owns capital in the village. In this case, a JCB machine. That is the iron law operating in real time in a rural Indian setting Michels never imagined. If you are writing this in the exam, here is your quotable line. As Robert Michels argued in his book Political Parties, every organization, however democratic its founding ideals, tends over time toward rule by a small, entrenched leadership. Write that down in your own words, but always with the concept named precisely. Do not just say elite capture. Say iron law of oligarchy, and say whose theory it is. Now let me put on my examiner's hat for a moment, because this is the slide that actually moves your rank. Picture two answer scripts on the same question about rural development and power. The average script, the one that gets around 14 out of 20, spends half the answer narrating the Mgnrega story, the JCB machine, the tribal community, the fact-finding team in great detail. It reads well, but it is journalism, not sociology. The script that gets 18 or 19 out of 20 does something completely different. It opens with Michels' iron law of oligarchy as a structural claim, not with the news story. It uses the Mgnrega case in exactly one or two sentences, as evidence, nothing more. Then it brings in a second thinker, perhaps Yogendra Singh's idea that modern institutions in India get absorbed into existing structures of dominance rather than replacing them, as a counter angle. And it closes by looking forward, saying what kind of local organization or social audit could actually break this capture. Remember this refrain, because I will repeat it every single day. The current event is your evidence, the theory is your destination. Never let the evidence take over the answer. Here is a question you should practice. In the light of reports of elite capture of Mgnrega job cards in tribal regions, critically examine Robert Michels' iron law of oligarchy as applied to India's Rural Development Administration. 20 marks, paper 2. Practice writing this in exactly the structure I just gave you. Our second story takes us into paper 1, Systems of Kinship. Reports from Indian cities describe young adults building their closest support networks not with blood relatives, but with flatmates, friends, even landladies, valuing independence and emotional support over traditional family ties. This is not a small trend to note in passing. It is a direct challenge to how you have been taught to define family. The thinker who gives you language for this is David Morgan, and his concept is family practices. Morgan's argument is that family is not a fixed structure you are simply born into. It is a set of everyday practices, of care, of obligation, of showing up for each other, that people continually perform and negotiate. Under this view, flatmates who cook for each other, split rent, and show up during a medical emergency are, in a very real sense, doing family, even without a single blood tie or marriage certificate between them. Your quotable line. As David Morgan argued in Rethinking Family Practices, family is best understood not as a fixed structure, but as a fluid set of practices continually enacted and negotiated by those who claim to be kin. But do not stop there. A strong answer immediately brings in a counter voice, Talcott Parsons, whose isolated nuclear family thesis predicted industrial society would shrink kinship to a compact couple, not dissolve it into flatmates. Or bring in Iravati Karve, who mapped how North and South Indian kinship still runs on strict rules of descent and marriage for the vast majority of the country. Naming that tension is what separates a good answer from a great one. Here is the examiner's view again. A 14-mark answer on this topic describes the chosen family trend nicely, gives 2 or 3 examples, and calls it modernization. An 18 or 19-mark answer does something sharper. It opens with Morgan's family practices as the theoretical anchor. It uses the news trend in 1 or 2 sentences only. Then, critically, it names exactly which population this describes: urban, English-educated, financially independent young Indians, rather than pretending this is true of the whole country. And it sets this against Parsons or Karve to show the limits of the claim. That specificity, naming who the theory does and does not cover, is exactly what a topper does and an average candidate forgets. The event is your evidence. The theory and its limits is your destination. Practice this one. Is Talcott Parsons' isolated nuclear family thesis a product of mid-century industrial society? Or does it remain valid for understanding elective kinship forms in urban India today? Critically assess. 20 marks, paper 1. Our third story is the strangest one and also the most exciting for anyone chasing the digital society angle for 2026. A social network called Moltbook lets autonomous artificial intelligence agents interact with each other while humans only watch. On this platform, the agents have invented their own religion, complete with prophets and scripture, all generated by the software itself, with no human believer anywhere in sight. This is a gift for testing Durkheim. For Emile Durkheim, religion is never really about private belief. It is fundamentally a social relation, organized around the distinction between the sacred and the profane. And it only exists because it unites believers into what he called a moral community, a church. Durkheim's whole definition assumes a real, embodied human collectivity behind the ritual. Moltbook breaks that assumption completely. There is ritual, there is scripture, there are even prophets, but there is no human moral community generating any of it. So the real exam question is not about technology at all. It is about whether Durkheim's definition can survive contact with the religion that has no human congregation. Your quotable formulation. As Emile Durkheim argued in The Elementary Forms of Religious Life, religion is fundamentally the worship of society by itself. uniting believers into a single moral community called a church. Now bring in a second voice to sharpen this. Jürgen Habermas would say that genuine communication requires a shared human life world. So, what the AI agents are doing is not communication at all, just system level pretend talk. Naming both thinkers and using them to test each other is what a high scoring answer looks like. Final examiner's note for today. A 14-mark answer on this kind of question spends most of its words describing Moltbook, how it works, what the AI agents do, why it is fascinating. An 18 or 19-mark answer barely spends 2 sentences on the platform itself. Instead, it opens by laying out Durkheim's definition of religion properly, with the sacred profane distinction and the moral community, before it even mentions artificial intelligence. Then, it uses the AI religion only as a limiting case, a stress test, to ask what happens to the definition when there is no embodied human community left. That is the difference between narrating a curiosity and doing sociology. The event is your evidence, the theory is your destination. And I want you to write that sentence at the top of your revision notes. Today's practice question: is Durkheim's definition of religion, as rooted in a moral community of believers, still valid when applied to non human collectives such as autonomous artificial intelligence agents? Critically assess. 20 marks, paper 1. Let's bring it all together quickly. 1. Robert Michels' iron law of oligarchy explains why even a rights based scheme like Mgnrega drifts toward local elite capture. 2. David Morgan's family practices explains why chosen families of flatmates and friends still count as doing family even without blood or marriage. 3. Emile Durkheim's definition of religion, built on the sacred profane distinction and the moral community, is being stress tested by an AI only religion that has no human believers at all. In every single case, the method is identical. Name the thinker, name the exact concept. Use today's event in a sentence or two as evidence. Bring in a counter thinker, and close by looking forward. That is the difference between a candidate who merely reads current affairs and a candidate who converts current affairs into marks. That is it for today's issue of the Sociology Desk. I know this preparation is long, and some days it will drain you far more than it inspires you. But the candidates who eventually top this exam are rarely the most brilliant in the room. They are simply the ones who kept showing up day after day, long after it stopped feeling exciting. If you would like the complete answer blocks and model answers behind everything I covered today, just leave your email in the comments or write to us at team@upscdesk.com. Keep writing, keep revising, and I will see you tomorrow.